Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm okay.
Good. Well, I mean, you
Doing
say you didn't get much sleep last night, so you're hoping that you can get as much out of your head and that everything's muddled. You're an actual rocket scientist, mate.
well. I have friends who are rocket scientists, so I work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is an amazing place to work. I'm speaking on my own behalf here. Very important for me to say that because then I can get pretty opinionated. But it's an amazing place to work, especially when we're not on pandemic lockdown.
Yeah, I
But
can
like a
imagine.
lot of people, I've been working strictly from home since like I don't even know when, March, April, something like that.
So, being a rocket scientist, do you ever look down on brain surgeons when you meet them?
um, so yeah. So again, some of my closest friends are rocket scientists. I'm a data scientist. I study climate. I started out looking at clouds, and now I've been looking more and more at biodiversity. And I actually know some. Uh, not really sure how they're. I think they might call themselves neuropsychologists, but um, they're they're basically brain scientists, and
Okay.
and some of them are wonderful climate activists too, actually. So
Oh,
yeah,
right. Okay.
I quite look up to them actually.
If ever I meet a brain surgeon, I'll ask him if he looks up to rocket scientists whoever he meets them. See if they get the see if they get the reference. You obviously you're an expert in climate change, and that's why I've got you on. I don't want to two sides of this because I think like that I feel as if the debate on climate change is over, and it was over decades ago. But for those people who are on the side of climate change isn't man-made, climate change is not happening, people who are saying, um, climate change or climate change is happening and there's nothing mankind can do about it. We're not driving it. It doesn't matter how much we fly. It's not going to change it. What what could you say to them that maybe would change their mind and maybe question what they're believing?
Okay, yeah. So let me take. There's kind of two questions in there, so let me take them one at a time. So first, the 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 physical evidence of global heating is so it's mountainous. The evidence
Turn
is
on the TV
overwhelming.
now.
Yeah, I mean, you can. Okay, so there's dozens of ways, maybe hundreds of ways to kind of to measure the heating of the planet and the impacts that that heating's caused. So, I mean, one of the most obvious things to do is just look at the ice. And, we can look at the ice sheet on Greenland, we can look at the ice sheet on Antarctica, and it's fascinating how we measure this. So there's actually a pair of satellites orbiting the Earth, and um, the ice or mountain ranges, they're additional mass on the surface of the planet. So it's more gravity. So it'll pull the first satellite a little faster as it gets closer to that additional mass because it's just gravitational attraction,
Mhm.
and so they get a little further apart. And then as the pair goes over, the back one catches up. So you can measure that distance very precisely between the two satellites. I think to a fraction of a human hair diameter. So
You
it's
can
a quite
obviously measure
precise
how
measurement.
much the ice is shrinking as a
You can
result of that.
see how much the ice is disappearing every year from its decrease in gravitational force. Okay, so it doesn't get much more fundamental physicsy than that. And of course, when things get hotter, ice melts. Then you can measure sea level rise quite precisely using completely different satellite techniques. You can measure ocean heat, so the oceans are getting hotter. More than 90% of the excess energy that's pouring into the earth right now is going into the ocean. And that's not measured with satellites, that's measured with basically floats, uh, a system of thousands of floats that just kind of drift around the ocean, and they go down a couple of kilometers about once a week and come back up, and they measure the temperature and other variables as they go. So we have, over the last couple of decades, we've created a remarkably precise record of ocean heat, at least in about the roughly the upper couple of kilometers of the ocean, and that's just going up like through the roof year on year. And notice I haven't even mentioned things that are happening on the land surface yet. that we
Yeah.
experience in daily life, like excess heat waves. The heat waves are getting worse. That's quite well documented, and you can attribute that very easily to global heating,
The
which is caused by humans.
hurricanes, tornadoes.
Wildfires are increasing. Hurricanes are getting stronger. That's all physics that we understand pretty
No,
well.
because the warmer oceans drives the warm air or something like that. That's why they're
Well, the
more.
warmer oceans, the ocean, warm ocean water is like the fuel for hurricanes, and that's getting that the oceans. When you have regions in the ocean that are warmer than they typically are, that's when you get worse hurricane seasons. There's other factors that are making the hurricanes worse too. One of them is just a warmer atmosphere holds more water. So that makes the rain, so it's not just hurricanes, but all kind of heavy rain events are getting worse, including hurricanes.
Yeah.
And there's even effects that are changing how global air circulation patterns work with the jet stream, for example, and the polar vortex. And that might be changing the way hurricanes move. And whether they park themselves over Houston for multiple days or they kind of move away. So if they park themselves, that makes the storm much more damaging. And then, of course, the storm surge is getting worse because of rising sea levels.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the sea level rise is coming about half from ice melting in the ice sheets and in the glaciers, and about the other half is just from the water expanding, because hotter water takes up more space. So again, it's just basic physics. I could go on and on. It doesn't take scientific measurements anymore we can experience this ourselves, like with the heat waves and when you're breathing in wildfire smoke, and it's getting to the signal is so strong that you don't need subtle instruments to measure them anymore. So,
yeah, like I said, I didn't want to both sides it because I feel like the debate is over now. But obviously, I have to ask the question because so many people are so dead set against it, and I understand it. I used to be a climate change skeptic. It wasn't that long ago. It was only about 10 years ago, and the way I changed is I'm very interested in physics. So I took an online course in physics over here in the UK. You can do it over here in the UK. The government actually paid me to do it, believe it or not. They gave me like £300 for the year to take it. And it was a physics course. And the first question was on climate change and was on, the carbon cycle, etc. And I had to do certain calculations with regards to carbon that was hidden in ice from centuries ago, from previous ice ages. And the mathematical, the first question I came to, I had to do a mathematical calculation. And my calculation basically said that by the end of this century, we were going to heat up somewhere in the region of 11 degrees if we carried on, taking the rolling average. And I remember it was about 5 days before the exam was about to be put in. And my tutor rang me and said, "You still haven't put your stuff in." I said, "I'm sure this is wrong. It can't be this bad. It can't be." But I did put it in. I forget, I say 11 degrees. It might have been like 5 or 6. But, I got 90-something% on that. It really is. We're in a bad way, aren't we, mate?
Well, first of all, cheers to you for going from climate denier to
I really was
essentially a climate activist now. You're raising awareness right now about this emergency, which is what we need. So to get systems change, to get policies that will actually start to take us away from this deadly course that global society is on right now, we need millions and billions of people all over the world to realize that this is a tier 1 top shelf emergency. It doesn't get more emergency than this. You're absolutely right. To go back to your first question, the second part of it, we know that this emergency is 100% human caused. Mm-hmm. So my answer to people who say like, is it pointless? Are we screwed no matter what? It's a 100% human caused problem. So that's actually really reassuring, because if we decided to, we could stop it right away. We could stop it really fast. Yeah. All we need is a kind of collective agency. We've got 8 billion people on this planet right now. If they all decided to stop this and kind of live within the planetary limits that are so kind of clearly defined by physics and biology, we would stop this really fast. So I find that encouraging. And that means that the whole battle right now is it's a social battle, it's an economic battle, it's a humanistic battle, it's a battle about how we think, and how we kind of collaborate and how we live together and how we distribute resources between nations and between ourselves, and how we interact with non-humans too. That's a critical part of it that doesn't get talked
Okay,
about.
how we interact with non-humans.
Yeah.
Your book, Being the Change, Live Well and Sparkle. I love that title, by the way, Live Well and Sparkle. A climate revolution. You talk about being the change that you want to see in the world. And I really respect people who look in the mirror and try and start with themselves. There it is, being the change, live well and sparkle. I love that. I'm going to get that, and I shall be reading it. More than the list of books I've got to read is getting
Oh,
really.
I have a huge stack too.
Yeah. How you interact with, let's start with how you mentioned animals there. Let's start with there. You changed your diet, didn't you? And you are the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah, and
you're talking to a real meat lover here, by the way. And
yeah, well,
I also love the planet as well. So
yeah, so it's tricky to talk about these kind of actions that we can take on our own to kind of bring our personal lives in alignment with what we know is happening and what we know has to happen to kind of to turn this global ship which is heading towards this waterfall, to turn it, you know, we want alignment with principles that will help at all scales.
right.
So that's not just personal scale, of course, that's also at the scale of your community. So you can start to interact with people that are within your immediate circle, your city, you know, your state or province, and then all the way up to the national level, and then even to the international level. So it's very hard to, can be very overwhelming and difficult to think and to kind of come up with a strategy for how you, as one person, can interact with this global problem that requires international cooperation, and so
do it in a way that doesn't come across as preachy and, you know.
Yeah. So I focus on kind of raising awareness. Like everything I do is designed to raise awareness. So talking to people just in your daily life. Like if you're in a shop or something and there's some way to work climate into the conversation, why not do it? And you can do it in a way that sort of kind of reaches to that person and their values. You can just, a lot of times I just mention, you know, like, wow, it's a really bad heat wave right now. I'm really terrified about climate breakdown. You know, it can be as simple as that. And then if you kind of relate it to your own emotions like that and how you're feeling about it, there's no way for someone to basically say you're wrong, right? Because you can't be wrong about your own emotions.
No, of course you can.
Yeah, and then kind of political speech too. You know, protesting, direct action. You know, more people are realizing that this is so bad and it affects their lives and their children's lives so directly at this point that they're willing to take risks, you know, up to including being arrested, as a form of speech, as a form of raising awareness over this global emergency. Now, that said, a very supportive action, in my opinion, and something which has really helped make my message that this is an emergency much more powerful and resonant, and has helped give me more of a platform to spread that message, is to simply reduce fossil fuel use and reduce my own emissions, right? Because
and you've done it to 1/10, haven't you? One tenth
yeah,
of an average person.
Yeah, about a tenth of the average U.S. person. So, and the U.S. person is somewhere around 20 metric tons of CO2 equivalents per year, which is quite a bit higher than the average person in the UK or in Europe. You guys are more on the order
I've
of
seen
like,
your fridges, mate.
yeah.
I've seen your fridges. Your fridges are the size of my front room.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, that the typical American will fly more and they drive a bigger car and they have bigger houses and whatnot. So we're roughly about twice per person the emissions of people in Europe, and some European countries are even quite a bit below you know, half of the emissions of the average American. So yeah, I've reduced it down to roughly 2 metric tons per year, which in my opinion is relatively easy. It's very, very hard to go further than that. because the systems that we have in place for just living a normal life are fossil fuel.
Just,
So
I mean,
it's,
just moving from A to B must be really difficult. I mean, obviously flying, I can imagine is a
yeah,
complete
so
no-no, isn't it?
yeah, so I haven't flown since 2012. That's one of the to cut your that's the biggest piece for was the biggest piece for me to cutting my emissions
How do you
down.
get abroad, or do you just not go?
Well, I've been to Canada since I stopped flying in 2012. So for me, it's basically Canada and Mexico would be my two options really for going abroad right now. Um, I think that international travel without flying will start to become increasingly normalized and will become easier, and there will be better options for it.
You think
Um,
ocean going, or
exactly. But if you can't fly and you want to cross an ocean, you're going to be going on the ocean. And I've been a sailor my whole life since I was a kid. I used to love sailing in these little boats called Sunfish on Lake Michigan in the Midwest. Sailing in lasers, and then I taught sailing when I was a high school teacher for a couple of years, and I've always loved sailing. And so to me, 70% of this planet is ocean, and it's quite beautiful to be
yeah,
out there, in my opinion. It's an experience that I think we've kind of really lost as a species when we stopped kind of being an ocean-going species. So there's benefits too. I mean, I think getting places fast is nice, but there's other things that are nice about travel besides just getting someplace really fast. So I try to look on the kind of the brighter side of some of these changes, and envisioning a post-carbon world. It's not necessarily all bad. That's actually the reason I wrote my book, was because a lot of the changes I made to go from 20 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year down to about 2 actually made my life better. And in my opinion, one of them was not eating meat anymore, and then eventually becoming vegan. It makes you feel a little bit lighter. The way I did it was I did an experiment for a month where I'm like, I've been thinking about being vegetarian for years and years.
when was this? How long ago?
This was, I was like 2010, 2011,
Right, okay, so
somewhere around that time.
relatively recently, last decade.
Yeah, I used to be a pretty enthusiastic meat eater too before that. But, there's one post, we have a holiday here called Thanksgiving, which is very meat oriented. It's very like
Yeah, I've
heavy,
been to one. It's
big, heavy meal. And I've been thinking about becoming vegetarian, both for carbon emissions and just for animal welfare. I think there's a lot of problems with the way we produce meat. It's not healthy for the animals. It's not healthy for us, and creates multi-resistant bacteria, which is a problem that we don't talk about very much, and has been very much overshadowed by this pandemic, which is also, you can get zoonotic viruses. So you can get worse bacteria and worse viruses because of the way anyway. So I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I was feeling really heavy. I was in line to get a taco that day. I was a postdoc at Caltech, and so I used to really like this kind of this truck that made Mexican food, and I was gonna get a meat burrito, and I'm like, why don't I just get the vegetarian one and try this for a month, because I was feeling really heavy from the meal the night before. I'm like, I'll go till Christmas, which is another big, usually heavy meat-oriented meal. And over that month, I just liked it better. Sometimes I'd be like, I feel like eating meat tonight, so I did. Then afterwards, I'd feel kind of worse, sort of heavier. So it stuck. It just wasn't that hard for me to make that change. I love bicycling. I think it's a great way to stay in shape. One of the hard parts about this lockdown is, for me, is that my main excuse for biking, which was to get to work and back, has gone away. So I think I put on a few pounds because of that. So I miss. So we still bike. That's one of our main things as a family. We do this kind of like this couple of mile loop, which is quite fun. But it's better to have it built right into my life with the commute than you just get more miles in.
One of the good things that it has, I mean, if you can have a good thing to come out of a pandemic, is that people have certainly been started taking their health and their immune system, etc., more serious. And we're seeing a lot more. I'm certainly seeing a lot more people, exercising out when I'm out running, as well. So I'm hoping that even just people trying to help their health, etc., is going to cut down on people going to use their car. Although my brother uses his car to drive to the park for him to go to walk, and
Yeah.
the walk to the park would be less of a walk than his actual walk on the park, but he drives there.
Well, so I think again, it's important to put this conversation in context about why it's useful to reduce your personal emissions. I think that there's been a lot of confusion about that point. When I started down this path, I think before I started reducing my emissions, I kind of was motivated by a desire not to put those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Once I started doing it, I'm like, oh man, this is a huge global problem. A couple of metric tons that I'm not putting in is not going to solve this problem. That became very, very
Yeah.
clear. And if you have this kind of like maybe subconscious sense that somehow these actions might solve the problem in some kind of direct way, then I think it gets really discouraging quite quickly. And it can be, for some people, I think it can be a distraction from the possibly more impactful actions that we can take that raise awareness. So for example, I would say, doing podcasts is probably more important than reducing one's own personal emission, just because it's spreading that message.
Spreading the awareness and spreading the message.
Exactly.
And I think education is
Yeah.
really key, isn't it?
We do need to change systems. And to do that, we need policies that will really kind of supercharge emissions reductions. Things like putting an annually increasing fee on carbon emissions that's then returned to the people. I call that a climate income. But that, ending fossil fuel subsidies is a no-brainer. That has to happen
It's
immediately.
huge. It's huge as well.
And
I looked at it. It's 5 trillion
yeah,
or something like that subsidized globally a year. It's the biggest. It's the biggest industry on the planet by a mile. And there's a reason that a gallon of fuel that you put, a gallon of gas that you call it in America, that you put in your car, is cheap. Is more expensive. Sorry, he's cheaper than a gallon of water.
yeah, it's amazing. And we need to accelerate the transition away from fossil fuel energy and toward renewable energy. So why would we want to make fossil fuel energy cheaper? We're subsidizing precisely the wrong form of energy. If we know we need to transition from fossil fuel system to a carbon-free energy system, so we should be subsidizing this. Instead, we're subsidizing this. It's a very backwards-looking thing, and it really shows, unfortunately, how our policymakers in every party are corrupted by the contribution influence, the money influence from this industry. Yeah. So it couldn't be more clear. Of course, the fossil fuel industry wants to keep its subsidies because it's basically just free handouts for them, right? And yeah. it prevents the transition to renewables, which is their biggest threat right now, right? So of course they want to keep subsidies, so they just pay a little bit of money. They bribe the policymakers to keep this happening, right? So again, reducing our own emissions is a fantastic thing to do. There's no hard and fast line between so-called personal actions and so-called systems actions. We are the system, right? Yeah. And especially the ultra-rich among us, they're the ones making the decisions, the fancy academics, the celebrities, the policymakers themselves, the CEOs, that small fraction of the population, 5 or 10%, are producing something like 50% of all the emissions, right? And so of course they're pushing back really hard against people like me who are saying that yes, reducing your own footprint is important. It does contribute to systems change. We're shifting norms. We need to shift norms. We have to revoke the social license for burning fossil fuels and for the fossil fuel industry to exist at all. That should not be socially acceptable. And one way we shift that those norms and revoke that social license is by basically saying it's not okay to burn this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And if you're still burning that stuff, and you're maybe burning way more than the average person in your country, like a lot of climate leaders are, who fly. It's very prestigious to fly someplace and give a keynote address, right? They put you up in a hotel,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
treat you like a little, like royalty, right? And it makes you feel really good. And you might even feel like you're really helping by giving your big keynote address on climate, right? but really, you're just, people subconsciously see that, and they're saying, oh, this climate leader is saying that this is an emergency, but he or she obviously doesn't really think
It
that.
happened. It happened
If they
here.
really thought it was an emergency, they'd be changing their actions,
Yeah.
right? If
It
your
happened.
house is on fire, you freaking grab your kids and get out there and call the emergency, right? You
Yeah.
don't just like stay in your house and keep doing whatever it is you're doing, which is what these climate leaders are doing right now if they're not actually walking the talk. So it's very, we have to make this very clear. We're not going to solve this problem just by reducing our personal emissions, but it's not a bad thing to do at the same
No,
time.
it's not.
We should be doing that and lots of other things as well. We have to stop with this this false dichotomy, and as climate activists, we have to stop, sort of saying like policing which actions are good and bad. We need all of the above, and we should be. It's hard to give up one's own fossil fuel privilege. It's hard to give up that sense of being really important, but we need to start putting the good of the planet over our own careers and over our own egos. I can't, I wish I could sugarcoat it, but I think that's really true. Once climate leaders start walking the talk more, I think more and more people will get the message that this is really urgent. They'll be like, holy crap, these people are finally, starting to change and they're stopping flying. It's so bad that they cannot, it feels disgusting to me personally to burn fossil fuels. I don't like it. When I use the stove, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of the fossil gas coming out of that thing and burning, and I'm aware of like how that fossil gas is produced, how much of it leaks into the atmosphere, how it's probably worse to use fossil gas in terms of global heating than it is to use coal because of the leakage, right? Because methane is such a strong greenhouse gas. So I'm highly aware of this, and it feels disgusting to me. And I know that I haven't gotten my own fossil fuel use down to zero, and I don't want to obsess over that because I want to spend a lot of energy doing things like this and trying to raise awareness. I've got so many initiatives which take a lot of time. So I'm walking this kind of middle path between speaking with my actions by reducing my own emissions and doing all of this other stuff to push for systems change at the same time, right? That's, to me, like it's my own happy balance. And I don't want to scare any potential activists away. If you're not ready to reduce your emissions, if you're not ready to fly less, if you're not ready to get on a bicycle, join our movement anyway and speak out. We need every voice as part of this. But once you're ready, you can make your own activism and your message even stronger by making some of these changes. That's how I put it.
What one thing could people do? What one thing do you suggest people to do to make an instant change in their lives that can help? Because obviously, if we all make these changes, it's going to have a. I saw the weather when lockdown happened over here, Peter. It was the weather was incredible. Nobody can tell me that this was an accident. There was no smells of any fossil fuels. The birds were chirping. It was beautiful. What one thing could we do collectively that would change everything?
Yeah. So the one thing I would urge anyone to do if they're just starting out is to simply join a group. Join a climate activism group. Join Sunrise in America. Join Extinction Rebellion. It's a global group.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a youth, join Fridays for Future and start school striking, even digitally. If you're willing to joining any group like that, any climate, and I'm a fan of joining multiple groups. You don't have to join just one.
Mm-hmm.
So this symbol on my shirt, I wear this almost every day.
Brilliant, isn't it? Yeah.
I used to wear it every day until the lockdown, and now sometimes I'm like, no one's going to see me anyway. But it's not just Extinction and Rebellion. It's the extinction symbol. It's a symbol that says we're in the sixth mass extinction and we're in a climate and ecological catastrophe right now. So that the group called Extinction Rebellion, which I do support, but I support other groups like Sunrise and Fridays for Future, and I work with Fridays for Future quite extensively. The group has adopted this symbol The
Right.
symbol is not the group. It's bigger than the group.
Okay.
But by joining a group, you start to educate yourself. You start to ally with other people that have been doing this, some of them for quite a long time. So
Yeah.
they know what they're doing. So you start to make friends, and your own kind of thoughts and actions start to vibrate with the same resonances, with the same frequencies of these people in these groups. So you're learning from them. You start to move in phase with them. So you're making their voice louder, and you're getting up to speed much more quickly than if you try to do anything on your own. So that might not have been the answer you were looking for, because you were thinking
No,
more in
no,
terms
not at
of
all. That's a great answer.
yeah,
It's not what I would have thought, but yeah, it's something that's an immediate sort of thing that people, and they don't have to change the way they do anything. They're just going to join a group. That's great.
yeah. And then once you start kind of getting engaged in that world of climate activism, then if you have additional energy and you're in a position to do so, 100%. If you can start flying less, that's a great thing to do. Because again, the flying less thing, I get so much pushback about this frankly, from people who don't want to fly less. And I think the whole flying thing is such a microcosm of climate justice. There's no way for a normal person to contribute more quickly, hour for hour, to global heating than by getting on a plane, just because the emissions are so tremendous. And, we're not. So if you're a frequent flyer, you're actually contributing quite a bit to global heating. And only the world's richest people can be frequent flyers. So only a very, very small fraction of people living on this planet fly in planes frequently. So it's like the people that are the least impacted are the ones that are contributing to the problem the most. Just like in terms of kind of on the national stage, the countries that are least, the nations that are least impacted, like the UK and like the United States and like Canada, are the ones that are contributing to climate breakdown the most, right? And these are the places where, to solve this problem, we have to, the big emitting nations are the ones, and the big emitting individuals are the ones that have to reduce the fastest, for the simple reason that if you're already emitting almost nothing, then if you're emitting one, like somebody in Bangladesh, for example, the typical person there, maybe like 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalents per year, you cut that in half, it's such a small amount compared to someone who's emitting 50 metric tons of CO2 per year, right? And the same thing, that same thing goes for a nation. So I believe that it's deeply, deeply irresponsible to put 2050 as the goal for having zero greenhouse gas emissions.
Wouldn't like 2025 be too late?
Well, there's no question of too early.
Can we do
that? If we decided to, if 8 billion people said, this is my top priority, and this has to be the top priority of my government, and we're going to throw out any leader, even if it means rebelling. If we can't vote them out, we're going to rebel and throw them out. If 8 billion people on this planet decided it was their top priority, we could do it by 2025. I think that's unlikely to happen. Social movements unfortunately take a longer time to build. But I think this goal of 2050 is deeply irresponsible, because clearly policymakers in positions of power right now, they're not going to be in power in 2050. So it's just such a brazen way of kicking the can down the road. Yeah. The goal should be for high emitting countries like the UK and the US, the goal should be 2030. Even if the goal was 2050 globally, the high emitting nations would have to go much faster for the reasons I've already laid out, and because technologically and economically, they're in a better position to reduce quickly. So they have the high emitting nations have to reduce much more quickly, and then they have to help other nations. They have to those carbon-free energy technologies have to be freely kind of given to other nations that don't have the technology and resources right now.
a developing nation. I mean, it's not fair for a developing nation
No,
who has been held back from, we're in this industrial information age right now. It's not fair for an African nation who maybe has got a chance to catch up because of, they didn't have landlines, but now they've got mobile phones. It's not fair for them to be held back because they won't be able to burn the amount of fossil fuels that we did for the last 60,
right.
70, 80 years, which is why we're so far advanced, although, some countries have healthcare. I was talking
Yeah,
to somebody about that last night.
and it's, it's very clear now that whatever resource we look at on this planet, there's 8 billion people, and the biosphere is starting to degrade, ecosystems are starting to crash, marine ecosystems, land ecosystems that we rely on for food, that we rely on for clean air and clean water. So I'm very concerned that we're going to start seeing regional food and water crises that have global geopolitical implications become more common. I think we're gonna start to see food prices start to go up. It's gonna become very clear that we're living in a regime where we need to share the resources that we have, including energy, much more equitably. We can't have billionaires hogging all of this energy to themselves and all of these resources to themselves, while there's people literally starving, billions of people. And we're going to have to start thinking about how at this point, it's unclear that by 2100, the way we're heading right now, a large swath around the tropics is going to become uninhabitable because of humid heat. So a combination of increasing
the 8 billion people on the planet is that going to force into moving? And
yeah, a lot of people are going to have to move away from the equator and toward the pole. And
animals already are, aren't they?
animals already are. Humans are lagging behind. We think we're the smartest species on the planet, but considering that we're the only ones screwing it up for everyone, and we're not even kind of adapting as quickly as these other animals, makes you really wonder if that's true.
We're fighting over these fossil fuels. It's the number one cause, let's face it, of all the wars in the world right now. And the military, the United States military, that's the number one burner of all the fossil fuels. So it's something that really it feeds itself. And obviously we've attached the value of our world's reserve currency to it as well. That doesn't help. It's, this is why I think people like yourself who have decided to look in the mirror and say, no, I'm going to change me, and if we all do it, that will change it, because these people at the top are not going to change the system. There's obviously too much money in it for them, and they like their flights to Aspen, etc., 5 times a year, don't they?
And they tend to be they feel safe. They feel they're not directly in contact with the impacts of global heating. They don't live in the places that flood in Louisiana. They don't live in the towns that burn down in California and Australia. Yeah. So they tend to live in kind of air-conditioned bubbles. So they're not in a place to have the empathy, and they're not in the place to have the lived experience that they need to see this as an issue of justice. And an issue of basically love for other beings, right? Yeah. So empathic love. So if I think it's starting to become very, very clear that this is an issue of justice and empathy and love to more and more people. And if it's not clear now, it will start to become excruciatingly clear in the years ahead that it's almost like we're being forced as a species, in my opinion, to grow up. We're being forced to take a hard look at ourselves as a species, how we live on this planet. Are we out there just for ourselves? Because if we're not in this together, if we're not trying to bring up our neighbors and our neighbors, not just the neighbors in our community, but the neighbors in other countries, and people that don't look like us, and people that don't have as much as us. If we feel like we're not in this together, and that we can somehow just insulate ourselves from these mounting global problems, we're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
it's
just
time
going to.
it's time to wake up as a species. Our whole history has been wars and, haves and have-nots and genocides against people that don't look like us and who don't think like us. I really believe that to come out of this without a global scale catastrophe is going to require us to really find a way to feel more empathy and to start to spread justice and resources. And that's part of why I love the way over the last year and a half, 2 years, the conversation has radically changed in terms of climate. We've started talking about a Green New Deal.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. We need to see how climate intersects with jobs and how it intersects with frontline communities and how it intersects with indigenous ways of life and indigenous peoples. It's all connected. We're suffering, and the planet now is suffering as a whole because of this this sort of colonial mindset of extracting for profit and of kind of essentially enslaving other bodies, whether it's through direct slavery or through wage slavery or through kind of outsourcing industries to developing nations and outsourcing pollution, air pollution to developing nations. It's all connected, and it's such a heavy lift. It's unclear to me if humanity is capable of waking up in that way, but I know a lot of individuals who are waking up, and it gives me a lot of hope to see that.
I'm hopeful too. So you mentioned now you're hopeful that we're going to find a way forward, and we need to come together and we need to have more empathy. I'm reminded. I think this is a movie for some reason, or a book I'm recalling. But we live, on this planet. There's an abundance of anything that we need on this planet. There's abundance of food. There's an abundance of fuel. We've got this big ball of hydrogen in the sky that we can get energy from. There's abundance of it. And I'm remembering, I can't remember whether it was a movie or a book, but there's a prison, and in this prison there are different floors. It's all underground. And you've got people at the top who are one level of prisoners, and then you've got the next level of prisoner, and there's obviously 10 levels of prisoners. And then every day they have food delivered, and there's plenty of food to feed all the prisoners. But the people at the top take what they want, and they obviously take half of it and waste it all, etc. And then it goes down to the next level and the next level. And by the time you get to the bottom level, there's just bones and there's scraps, and people are all fighting over it and killing each other for the food. Whereas the people at the top, they had their fill and they wasted most of it. This is a really good analogy, isn't it, for the way we've decided to sort of, feed the planet in the way, and the system that we've got. I mean, we've literally got a financial system right now that is, everybody's saying, look how fantastic it is. And it's built on something that measures how much we are consuming products. And we are almost, we've built this system that's almost leading to our very destruction, haven't we? And we have to change the system. And the way of doing that is obviously, we're not going to change the system because the people at the top are going to obviously keep it there as much as possible. We're going to have to change, aren't we?
Well, so I think of it in terms of kind of 3 huge steps for a species. So the first one that we're really starting to talk about in earnest now, finally. I've been terrified of climate breakdown for 15 years, and for the first 13 of those years, it was excruciating to be sounding this alarm and banging my head against the wall and just being ignored. And so at least now there's a powerful movement, and we're having this discussion. The first step is a carbon-free civilization. So that's the energy transition. We have to go to 0 fossil fuel use, not just like a little bit of fossil fuel use, but 0. Because that CO2 accumulates in that atmosphere and it stays there for thousands of years.
Well,
right?
I mentioned the carbon cycle when it was understanding the carbon cycle. That was when I got it in my head. That was like, oh shit, that's why.
People don't understand that what we're doing is irreversible. We can't just, if there's garbage in a park, you can go and clean it up. And that's very reassuring to know that you can always clean that stuff up. That's not the case with this. This CO2 pollution stays in the atmosphere for thousands of years, and it's very, very hard to take it out of the atmosphere. Because think about it. The reason it's up there in the first place is because we burn this stuff. It's almost free, comes out of the ground. We can burn it, and we drive a global economy. So it's incredibly wealth producing. So to run that wealth engine in reverse and take that and run the thermodynamics in reverse and take that out of the atmosphere is incredibly expensive, right? So it's unconscionable to put that economic burden on our children effectively. We don't even have these technologies at scale that can pull it out of the atmosphere. And even if we did, it would be incredibly expensive. They're going to be dealing with massive hurricanes and flooding cities and wildfires and agricultural systems breakdown and huge numbers of climate migrants and geopolitical destabilization. At the same time they're dealing with all of that, we actually expect them to spend like half of their economic, to spend half of all of their economy pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's impossible, and it's deeply irresponsible and a huge slap in the face of the younger generation to think that they could possibly do that.
So we're not going to be able to put carbon scrubbers on top of buildings that are going to sort this out, mate.
I mean, we could, but it'd be incredibly expensive. First of all, we don't have that technology yet. And second, at least at scale. And second, it would be incredibly expensive. So yeah, I don't think it's, we certainly shouldn't feel like somehow that's easy to do. And that, this is somehow a reversible process. This is irreversible pollution. We're at about 1.1 or 1.2 degrees Celsius of global heating right now over where we should be if we hadn't screwed around with the climate system. Things are already getting really bad at that slightly over 1 degree Celsius of global heating. And we're on track to get to 1.5 degrees sometime in the early 2030s, and then to blow right past that, okay? And it's irreversible. That extra heat means extra heat waves, like I've said, it means all these things that we're experiencing
and the problem will just run away with itself, won't it?
And it's hurting ecosystems, including human ecosystems. Like we are an ecosystem, right? Urban heat islands, if the global south, that band around the equator becomes uninhabitable, those are human ecosystems that we'll have to abandon, just like, coral reefs are dying, right? And they're moving more poleward, like every other, type of life on this planet, basically. Those biodiversity impacts the planet will experience those impacts for about 10 million years, right? Because this is a mass extinction. So this is what we're doing now, what we're doing in the next few years has implications for life on this planet for millions of years. Let that sink in. That's remarkable that our decisions right now in the next couple of years lay the course for humanity. It's not just the next
generation we're screwing things up for.
I mean, think of what humanity could be potentially capable of a million years from now. The best science fiction writers can't even imagine that. And we're screwing that up. Think of how many generations that is for our descendants. We're screwing that up right now because we want to fly to conferences or we want to fly to vacation. It's crazy. It's really, truly insane. So that's just the first step, is going to a carbon-free energy system. The second step is which you just mentioned, is moving away from economic systems that are addicted to growth. So one of the things that policymakers, there are few things in the United States that the Democrats and Republicans really agree on, but there are kind of two things that they do agree on. One is that they want to make life really good for their corporate donors and for billionaires and for rich people. Both of the parties here in the United States agree with that. And the second thing that they agree on is that I guess there's more things, but we need economic growth at all costs, right? No politician has ever said we want less economic growth, right? We have an economic system which is completely addicted to having this like 3% growth
Makes
per
no
year.
sense. We've got an economic system that is basically the same as a virus.
Yeah, basically.
The way a virus works.
And I don't think human beings are viruses.
As possible.
Yeah, the viral part, the destructive part of human civilization right now is this mindset that growth can continue forever on a finite planet, and that we can just, if we want more resources and it's over there and we have like more military power, we can just clobber them and take it, right? So we've been doing that for like hundreds, maybe thousands of years. that we've been colonizing other peoples and basically killing them, taking their resources, right? So, so a growth agnostic economy is an economy that serves people, and where the goal is basically human well-being and human thriving. And it's not just profit and GDP at all costs, which is the destructive part. So so this is even harder, in my opinion, than a carbon-free civilization, switching to a growth agnostic economy. And right now, some brilliant economists are starting to work that out. Like, what would that actually be like for businesses? What would that be like in terms of international trade? What would that be like in terms of our daily lives? So we have to start reimagining. Economic system is basically just a system of society where we exchange labor and resources and live together. And it's how we organize that exchange of labor and resources, right? And right now, it's serving the billionaires and the ultra rich and the corporations and the decision-making class. We need to reshape that system so that it works for everyone, and not just humans, but for non-humans, for whales and for trees and for other life on this planet, which we're extracting and destroying at a truly alarming rate. We have to learn that, and this is the third stage, is towards an ecological human presence on this planet, which means that we are deeply grateful to be here, and which means that we don't take any of this for granted. Like you pointed this out too. This planet is a gift. It's a cosmic oasis. I spent 10 years doing astrophysics.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's incredible.
It is not nice out there, though, in the universe. It's not
incredible.
There's stars blowing up.
You talk about entanglement. Just
yeah.
Look at entanglement. Seriously, people go and look at entanglement. It's incredible. Sorry, carry on.
And anyway, this planet is just, to me, cosmically, kind of mind-blowingly, riotously, orgasmically, psychedelically beautiful. It's an amazing place. Nice. It's the saddest thing about human existence is that we get so ground down by daily life, by capitalism, by inequality. When you look at a kid going outside and looking at the birds and looking at the bugs and looking at the plants and looking at the sun and the rain, we start out when we're born with this sense of miraculous wonder. And then it's ground out of us, and we have to make a living, and we have to punch the time card, and we have to put food on the table. And some of us have police that want to kill us, right? And we have to work. It's just unbelievable to me that, and very, very tragic, that so many of us have this sense of wonder. We lose this sense of wonder and this sense of gratitude. And what could be more amazing than walking on this planet and looking at the Milky Way at night and realizing that we're in this together, that we are the universe having a conversation, and we are the universe being aware of itself and appreciating itself and being in awe of itself. And we should look at the other life on this planet, whether it's a fungus, or whether it's a plant, or whether it's a squirrel or a tree or a fish or another person. When we take a breath of air, we should realize that connects us to every other living being on this planet.
We all come from the same thing.
In a very physical way. When you take a breath of air, some of that air has been part of every other human over, say, the age of 20. So there's a mixing time scale. So we're breathing in, we're breathing out, that carbon goes into our bodies during respiration, it comes back out into the air, and then other people breathe it in. So we're literally reincorporating parts of each other's bodies into ourselves. We're connected at this very deep level. And we have to realize that this sense of separation and this sense of competition is false, and that we are, and it's very deep, actually, spiritually speaking. And this is, it's weird. I don't think there are too many scientists talking about this, but it has to do, I think, ultimately with accepting the fact that we will all die, and learning to be okay with that, right? And learning to let go of some of that fear. I think that fear of our death is what makes us want more and more. It makes us want the huge mansions and the helicopters and the billions of dollars. And it's what leads to warfare, because we're afraid of other humans. I'm not saying that we should all let other people kill us by any stretch, but we have to be courageous at this point in human history, which means even being courageous about our own mortality and being okay with saying, like, I'm alive, I have enough, and I want you to have enough too. And I want you to live and to thrive too. It's not just about me. When you thrive, we can enjoy this beautiful planet and this beautiful universe together, and we can thrive together. And I know it sounds sort of corny, right?
No, it doesn't, mate. It sounds beautiful.
I know that's why I'm here. And I hope more and more people realize that that's why they're here, is to try to spend their entire life's energy kind of courageously working toward this, a beautiful human presence on this planet, that it's possible if we decide it's possible, right? I'm a physicist. I'm trained as a physicist. There's no physical law that says we have to have wars.
Yeah.
We need to do better as humans, and that's what I'm pushing. That's what the climate crisis means to me, is that we have to do better as humans, and that we're not separated. So again, it's really important to put this in the context of these so-called individual actions of flying less, and I do that out of love. I know it's not because I don't want to harm others on this planet, and I don't for a second believe, think that that's going to solve this. I don't think saying that we're all together and that the stuff that I'm saying, I don't think it's going to solve this. But at least it's some atoms. I'm made up of these atoms. It's some number of atoms at least moving in the right direction. And anyone moving in the right direction, I applaud you. The direction toward a sustainable human presence on this planet, and towards, frankly, love and empathy for people and life on this planet that isn't you. It's that simple.
I truly, I really do appreciate everything that you're doing, and I for one want to live in the world that you are looking forward to living in, and you're trying to change, and I'm going to be doing everything I can to help that change. I wish we had more time. I could talk to you for ages, Peter. Please come back and
maybe we could do it again sometime later.
I'd love to. Please, everybody, get his book, Being the Change, Live Well and Sparkle, A Climate Revolution. Peter Kalmus, thanks very much for coming on the podcast, mate.
Yeah, thanks for the good discussion, Gordon. All right,
cheers.
be well.